A little over 2 years ago, the Golden State Warriors won 15 games in a single season. Granted, it was a shortened season, but they went 15-50 in the 2019-20 season, and now just a little over 2 years later, they're back. A team that was really the face of the league for the second half of the 2010s, from when they broke onto the scene in 2015 to signing Kevin Durant to being a finals contender for the entirety of the second half of that decade. They were the team in the league, and to see them drop so rapidly and so hard, all the way down to winning just 15 games, and now being back to where they are very squarely in championship contention is incredible. And there's so many different things to think about what happened in that 2 to 3 year span for Golden State, whether it be guys getting injured, guys leaving, different roster moves, timings, all these different things. But the main takeaway is that Golden State did as well as they could have with what they were dealt in that 2 to 3 year span as you possibly could expect an NBA franchise to do, and that, along with some other factors, is why they're back. And really, you do have to go back and begin with not only Klay getting hurt, Kevin Durant getting hurt, but then Kevin Durant leaving. And it's a really interesting situation to look back on now, because it's very easy to argue at the time that he never should have left. And of course, now that he shouldn't have left with the lack of success that he's had in Brooklyn, it was an incredible basketball situation for him there in Golden State, but it was clear that he just didn't want to be there anymore. He didn't feel fulfilled in the championship contention that he felt in Golden State. Didn't really feel like people were giving him enough credit for those. And he wanted to go and do his own thing, in combination with the fact that him and Draymond Green were just not on good terms by the time it was time for him to leave. And I think most people expected him to leave. And it's weird, because obviously it's devastating to lose a player of Kevin Durant's caliber, and had he stayed and come back as healthy as he has, they would have been an incredible team. But what they essentially ended up getting out of Kevin Durant leaving has been a huge part of now the team that they've become. So he leaves, they basically get D'Angelo Russell, in exchange for Kevin Durant in a sign and trade. They try out the D'Lo thing, and at the time it was like, oh, we're really excited about D'Lo. He's gonna, him and Klay and Steph are all gonna play together. I think it's pretty clear now that they just didn't want to lose Kevin Durant for nothing. And it's an incredibly smart thing to do, even if you do have to overpay D'Angelo Russell on a max contract. It's better than getting absolutely nothing, because not getting absolutely nothing, in this case getting D'Angelo Russell, also gets you Andrew Wiggins and what turns out to be Jonathan Kuminga in the form of a draft pick. And I can't overstate how important Wiggins has been to this group, but also how unbelievable it is that he's become this important. I know that people laugh about the fact that he was an all-star selection and things like that, but he really is critical. He's turned into such a good defensive player for them, still very inconsistent offensively, but whatever Golden State imagined for Andrew Wiggins when they made this trade, it had to be pretty close to what they're getting out of him now in terms of their highest expectations for Andrew Wiggins. Because you go back and look at the first couple of seasons of Andrew Wiggins' career, you might be surprised how good his stats are. You might be surprised how good of a player he was, but the stats never really told the full story for Andrew Wiggins. He floated in these games. He only ever really cared about scoring, and that wasn't supposed to be his thing when he came into the league. He was supposed to be a strong athlete, someone that was a good two-way player and had good scoring instincts as well. And the defense just never translated. And so when Golden State made the trade for Wiggins, he was seen as one of the worst contracts in the league. Not that D'Angelo Russell was seen as a great contract, but to get Wiggins back was basically seen as a negative asset. And then of course you get the first round pick, ultimately becomes Kuminga. But if Wiggins doesn't become this, that trade is not looking very good for Golden State in an immediate sense, even though I think Kuminga can be something really, really good in the long term. But I can't overstate how unlikely it seemed at the time of the trade that Wiggins would become this in Golden State, the wing defender they need alongside Klay and Steph, and ultimately Jordan Poole, a guy that can be a complementary offensive option, someone that provides them a ton of versatility in the front court in those smaller lineups alongside Draymond Green. He has checked every box for them. And again, I don't think there's very many people on this planet outside of the Golden State Warriors front office that thought that was a realistic possibility. And so you go from Kevin Durant, Klay Thompson getting hurt, Klay obviously eventually coming back this season and being pretty good, not being what he was before, and how that turns into Wiggins. But then the big prize of this whole situation was supposed to be this big draft pick they got. Obviously, like I said, they had the worst record in the league. They were 15-50, and they end up with James Wiseman, the second pick in that draft. They get a little bit of bad lottery luck. They end up with the second pick. And at the time, it was a little confusing because a lot of people really liked LaMelo, myself included. I thought LaMelo should have gone first in that draft. They end up taking Wiseman because they did need a big at the time, and they've gotten literally nothing from him. If you had told them they're going to be a championship contending team again within 2 seasons of that draft selection, you would have assumed that Wiseman was at least a relatively significant part of that, some kind of decent starter, because of course they still have the core, they still have Klay, they still have Steph, they still have Draymond. Wiseman has not contributed to this whatsoever. So not only do they lose Kevin Kevin Durant due to injury first, and then he leaves. Not only do you have a second overall pick that does absolutely nothing, but you also deal with the injury issues of Klay Thompson, things like that, and you still are a championship contender. It's unbelievable. And one of the big reasons why is because they've always found a way. From the beginning of the dynasty, they've always found a way to do well along the edges, to find different players late in the first round, find undrafted guys, find veterans, find guys that will fit into a role. And for this team specifically, it was guys like Otto Porter, Gary Payton, who unfortunately is hurt at the moment, and now Jordan Poole. And I heard the other day, I can't remember where I saw it, but people were trying to come up with a nickname, right, for the Klay, Poole, Steph lineup. Someone called it the Poole Party lineup. I thought that was awesome. I love that nickname. Jordan Poole as a draft prospect was someone that honestly not a lot of people were excited about. Like he was just another semi-decent scoring guard in college. Like there was no reason to really be, amazed by him. He was a G League guy for the first couple of seasons of his career for a reason. And again, when you go back and look at some of the content that people were making, myself included, about what the Warriors could become when they went through this drought of, guys getting hurt, Steph getting hurt, being 15-50, getting a high draft pick. When you go back and look at some of that content, one of the main reasons that people thought that they would ultimately end up being good is because you had time to develop guys like, we weren't necessarily mentioning Jordan Poole at the time, but like Damian Lee, right? Like Juan Toscano-Anderson, being so bad that those guys have to play, that then they're ready for big time rotation minutes when the stars, namely Steph, do return. They're going to have a huge impact. And again, the fact that that's actually happened is pretty unbelievable. And then I do want to take a second to shout out someone that I think is really overlooked and underrated within this run for the Warriors. And that's Kevon Looney, another guy that when you go back and look at kind of their draft profile, not someone that a ton of people were very excited about. Late first round pick, a little bit on the lighter side. A lot of people didn't really even see him as like a true five. He was more so seen as this weird like combo forward guy. He's been awesome for them as well. Like within a team that they kind of became known for small ball, but now they're playing these lineups that are a little bit bigger, that have specifically been really effective against Dallas with, Wiggins, Draymond, and Looney all together. Looney's their only true big guy they have on the roster, and he's held down that spot. Again, in a situation in which when they drafted James Wiseman, they're obviously trying to replace Looney, and he's done a fantastic job of holding down that spot for them. Again, another guy that a lot of people just didn't really see any of this coming for. And the really cool thing about this run for Golden State and where they are now is it's very similar to what started the dynasty in the first place. It's a front office that drafts well, develops well. It's a system with Steve Kerr that is unlike anything else that anybody else plays in a league. They have more movement, they have more motion, they run less pick and rolls. They play a style that really requires a specific type of player, and it requires a real buy-in from the entire roster. And that makes not only being a front office in the NBA is challenging enough, but then to also add that extra layer of like these guys have to play within a system that is unlike anything else they've played with in their entire career. To find and identify those guys and develop them is a really difficult task, and they did it in the 2015-16 range when they first kind of became the dynasty with Steph and Klay and Draymond and ultimately KD. And they're doing it now as well. They've allowed Wiggins to fit in. They've allowed Jordan Poole to fit in. And it's so fun to see the continuing principles of a franchise, much like the Spurs were for, 2 decades. The continuing principles of a franchise always just work no matter what the pieces are and show continued and sustained success, which is the model that every team in the league wants to follow ultimately. And of course, near the end of this video, I also have to mention the fact that Steph is still the driving force of a lot of this, and Draymond is the driving force of a lot of this. And Klay's importance certainly is not where it once was, which makes perfect sense. And hopefully, eventually, as the years go by, he can get a little bit more comfortable post-injury. But the foundation of guys like Steph and Draymond, the ability that Draymond brings defensively, despite being not that big of a factor scoring-wise offensively, the spacing of Steph, how great of a teammate he is, like those guys deserve so much credit for this. And it's really an equal parts thing. Like Steve Kerr, I think, deserves a lot of credit for sticking it out through some really lean years there. He showed up to a team that just immediately is a finals contender once they get rolling with him. He's never really had to deal with something like this as a head coach, at least, has done a fantastic job. Steph, the same thing, dealing with the ups and downs of the injuries. He went from being in the finals every year to going 2 full seasons without winning a playoff series. Klay, working through the injury stuff. Draymond through some injury stuff and kind of redefining his role a little bit offensively, and then all the other guys developing as well. It is it is a testament to what is possible within an NBA front office and within an NBA franchise in terms of the sustained success that can be possible when guys buy in, when you have the proper system, and of course, when you have incredible players, guys like Steph, Klay, Draymond throughout the years. And I think no matter what the outcome is for Golden State's season, we're going to look back at these last 2 to 3 seasons as one of the more incredible, one of the better rebuilds that we've ever seen in the entire league, one of the fastest rebuilds we've ever seen. And of course, that 15-50 record is deceiving because they had a ton of guys hurt, and I get that. But not every franchise would have taken advantage of the opportunities put in front of them the way that Golden State has. And I still count Wiseman in that a little bit. I still think it's possible that he will get healthy and be really good for them. That's the one big miss for them. But even then, they've still found a way with guys like Kevon Looney to kind of fill that void. And you have to give them credit for how successful they've been at maximizing almost everything that's been put in front of them over the last 2 seasons. And if you don't believe me, let's just be honest, pretty much every single other organization in the league is jealous of what Golden State's been able to do throughout this run and throughout this rebuild. I'll see y'all next time.